cherché des nuits, je n'ai pas cueilli, j'ai cherché des nuits, j'ai trouvé l'écueil assis sur son nid. Le chant de l'alouette, je veille, je dors, j'écoute l'alouette et puis je m'endors.
Teresa was my big sister. She was, at the time that she died, she was 19, I was 14, and we grew up in Pierrefonds, on the West Island. In the fall of 1978, she disappeared, and she was missing for about 5.5 months. And the following spring, her body was found about a mile from the college residence in Compton, Quebec. At that time, it was a mystery of what happened to her. She was found face down in the water in her underwear. The police suggested she had committed suicide, had a drug overdose, all these things. It took me about 20 years after that event to do my own investigation to discover that it was none of those things. It was actually an unsolved cold case murder.
You've been fighting for victim rights since a long time now. You've been studying lots of unsolved crimes during the 70s. You're one of the only person who looked up at Diane and Mario's case in the last few years. Why this interest?
I think this is important. Teresa was someone who saw the best in everyone. She's very charitable and motivated by humanity. I needed to give back and attempt to help other families with their causes if they couldn't, because that's who she was.
We contacted both families. They were very surprised to receive a call after all these years. They didn't react the same way. Corbeil family was more discreet about what happened, not sure want to talk about it. Do you find it suspicious that they don't really want to participate?
No, I don't find it suspicious. It happens just in my own family. You know, I've been very vigilant and very outgoing, and I'm doing a public interview. That's a very different reaction than my brother. Even to the point where people occasionally suggest to me, hey, did you ever think your brother did it? Which is, it was a horrible thing. I understand why they would come to that conclusion. But they do this because he's so quiet, right? And he's in the background. People have different ways of dealing with things. Some people, like my father, was very much of the belief that, after Teresa was found, he did a little bit of work, but then it was time, as he said, to turn the page, that you need to turn the page and move on. Being asked the question over and over again can be re-traumatizing. It's like picking at a wound or something like that. My sister died at a college, and we just knew in our house, like at the dinner table, you didn't discuss education and you didn't bring up justice.
What can you tell us about Police of Longueuil first? Can you talk about them?
Of course. I even joke about it on my podcast. It's a little unfair, but I do. It's sort of like the last stop in criminal justice.
Why?
Because they're sort of known to not be very good at investigations. Statistics Canada, the last big study they did on homicide was in 2005. They looked back 50 years to see the efficacy rates of investigations into murder. And Quebec was on the bottom. Here's the really interesting thing. The most murders in Quebec happened the year these two children died. In 1975. About 226 murders. And after that, it went down. There's never been that many murders in Quebec. The number of murders are falling, and particularly in Longueuil. The clearance rate is flatlining at 65, 75%. You should have the capacity with fewer murders to do a better job on cases, but that's not what's happening.
This is Who Killed Teresa, and I'm your host, John Allore. Today we should go back to ground.
For me, a lot of my work, whether it's in the blog or in the podcast, is to the best of my abilities. I don't always get it right, but to the best of my abilities to help others with their causes if they couldn't.
I am going to talk about the case of Diane, Dery, age 13, and Mario Corbeil, age 15. The crime scene analysis showed that the two young people were murdered. There was always two questions that needed answering. Who and why? It's not possible that two young children are killed so close to their homes and they can't find anything.
When you did your podcast, did you receive any tips after that, if any interesting information?
A type of information that I received after the podcast on the Derys was the possibility that a family member related to Diane Dery might have committed this crime. There's a case later in the 80s of a young girl named Melanie Ducamp, who had been murdered by an offender named Michel Dery. And because of the last name, it was a provocative thing. And the question was, where was he at the time of the murders? It turned out he very possibly could have been living in the environ de Longueuil. Was he related to Diane? And now I never pursued it because it seemed too far-fetched. So I don't know, but that's another idea that came about from the podcast.
I can confirm you, it was Diane's cousin. He was related to Diane. Does it change something for you?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yes. That, it almost, when I considered it, seemed too much of a coincidence. It's like, come on, this is like the stuff out of movies. But now you telling me that definitely would make me want to look again at Michel Dery.
What element in this case struck you the most?
It seemed so unique. It seems so different from any other case that I've researched or read. Normally I look at a case and I can see two or three others that are similar. This one, I can't think of too many cases that are similar. It's so unique. Boy and a girl, two teenagers, viciously assaulted and murdered. He's stacked on top of her. What is that about? They put Mario on top of Diane. To me, it's a mark of immaturity. It's something children do to sort of, they were having sex. You know what I mean? It doesn't seem to me like some kind of Criminal Minds profiling signature. It seems to me like a gesture to humiliate the victims. I think towns and neighborhoods can keep secrets. I think over time, there's something counterintuitive happening, right? On the one hand, you'd expect someone to not be able to live with themselves, at least one person who knows something, to not be able to live with the guilt, right? And crack and clear their conscience, as you say. At the same time as that's going on, I think something else is going on. People are getting more invested and invested in their lives, and there's more at stake. And these people now have families and responsibilities and jobs. And the only thing at this point that is going to crack this case is somebody having a moral crisis. And it's going to take an individual who lived in Longueuil at that time to make a step of incredible moral courage to say,
I know what happened.
I know what happened, and I'm willing to sacrifice some comforts that I've become accustomed to over decades because I know in my heart this is the right thing.